Our graft, it's the standard shoestring. It's 28 to 29 centimeters. We put a FiberLoop and a TigerLoop in either end, just 3 whip stitches, the third one being locked. So that's our graft. So now on our workstation, we've got the tensioner loaded in on the tibial side. We've got our first graft loop loaded here. It's a little short because we're on the short table today. So we've made this loop just about so there's a little bit over 70 centimeters between the two, because when we tension it, it'll drop down. So that's how far we're maxed out here, but on a bigger table, you want this distance between graft loop tibia, graft loop femur to be about 70 to 80 centimeters. So now, these are the posts through which we're going to weave our graft. So the key is the free ends are going to end down at the tibia. So you pass the graft, just one end of the graft, doesn't matter which one, through the tibial loop. And you always want to even them up so you don't have to adjust so much at the end. So I get them about even. Drop one. And then through the femoral one, we go down on one through the loop with one arm. John's going to hold that. We go the opposite way with the other arm. Now the goal is to make these graft ends under tension the same. So adjust it. Now we tension it. And now we want this to be 70 centimeters. So now we're going to titrate this in to about there. We're going to get our block there. So that's locked down. So now we have a 4-stranded graft. We have control on the tibial end through our permanent loop and TigerLoop sutures. Alright, we're going to tie them off on the tensioner arm so that one person can do this from this point forward for the final GraftLink part of it. And then we're going to measure our final composite graft. We want it to be about 70 under stretch, and it is 70 under stretch. There's the 70 mark right there. So that's 70 millimeters. So we've got our tibial side. It's a standard non-reverse graft loop, and on this side we've done a reverse graft loop with the tails, the white tensioning tails coming out the tibial end. So now we take a suture, the first suture, and about 20 millimeters up, which marks where the tib-fib joint is, or the tibial extent of the graft, the aperture is. We want to try and shimmy our graft ends into the middle if we can. We're going to stuff them into the middle, right like that. And then I'm going to come across them with the suture, just a number 2 fiber wire. I'm going to shish kebab. I'm going to capture all 4 strands. And I'm going to swing around. I'm going to keep the needle on because we're going to bury our knot. Kayak. So I wrap them around opposite directions. Surgeon's knot, or just a single throw. I'll just actually do a slider. 3 throws is probably good enough. We're going to cut the tail of the non-needled end short. I'm going to take the needle end to bury our knot so there's less friction. And we're going to pull it through our graft to sink the knot. And then cut that flush. Good. I'm going to do that 2 more times. You want to leave no more than 20 for the tip, for the tibial side and the femoral side. You want to try and get all 4 ends again. Sometimes it takes 2 passes to do that. Here's what I mean by that. I'm going to roll back up here and catch this last arm. Good. Crisscross, wrap around, tie on top. Cut short the one end. Take the needled end, use the needle to kind of pull your knot into the center. Cut it short. That's just a way to get the knot buried. Then we do that 2 more times up here on the femoral end. Again, 20 millimeters from the end, capturing all the limbs. And again, on this one, I'm going to take a second pass just to make sure I got both. Crisscross the sutures. Tie them on top. Bury our knot. One last one, and we'll have a final construct. So this is the final one that goes on the distal tip. Cut the tail. One last pass. Looks pretty good, John.
Yeah.
Good. Now, so here's what we got in review. Graft rope, femoral side, under tension, big long loop. Got more than 40 millimeters to account for our flip through our femoral socket. This is, we've got a full 55. Would mark it probably right at 40 with a marking pen, just like usual, just to finalize our graft prep. That would be, once it passes into the orifice of the femoral socket, we're ready to flip our button. Then we want 20 millimeters again in the femoral socket, so we're good there. From here up, and in the tibial socket up to 20 in, so all our sutures will be completely in the tibial socket. So there we've got femoral graft, tibial graft, interarticular expanse, 4-stranded. Under tension, secondary backup sutures are the FiberLoop sutures through the free ends, the TigerLoop here, and the FiberLoop here. They're under tension on the back handle of our tensioner. Tied to themselves, that's okay, because we're going to swivel lock them up here and then cut them short. And we've got the graft under tension here. Wrapped it in a moist rag while we're getting the tunnels ready, and we're good to go. There's the modified GraftLink with TigerLoop and FiberLoop Augmentation. So here's the sizing block, the open-ended sizing block. You slip it onto your graft rope and you size it. This is going to be a size 9, just good and tight, not too tight. And then you can check that down on the tibia too, and that's nice and snug. So now we can use the same flip cutter, a 9 flip cutter on the femur and a 9 on the tibia. This is a nice way to do graft sizing with the graft in situ still under stretch. So once we get the femoral side deployed and seated, and tibial deployed and seated, then we use these FiberLoop and TigerLoop sutures through a single biocomposite swivel lock anchor for our flush secondary backup tibial fixation through that same little stab incision. So you can easily get all 4 strands through the swivel lock, and then you have a flush secondary backup fixation, good graft security on the tibial side.